What's going on, everybody? So we are live now. All the platforms are here. So we are going to get into the show pretty quickly. Today, I'm going to be talking about something pretty raw and real. And I'm excited for that because that's something I'm trying to do more on this show. Something that is, uncomfortable for me still, but something that I think has a lot of value. So today I'm going to be talking about leaning into discomfort. And the main topic of the show, I'm going to be reminiscing a little bit, but hopefully it's of value to you as well, about my move to Calgary, because it's crazy to think, but I moved to Calgary in June 2017. And, it's 2023 now. So like we're coming up on 6 years since I've been here. And that's just absolutely wild to see. Like part of me feels like I've lived here my whole life, and part of me feels like I moved here last week. And so, yeah, we're gonna get into it pretty quick, but I'm gonna be talking about like the move as a whole, and then talking about the ins and outs of like the discomfort that went along with that move, and in turn what I've been able to gain from that. So looking back on this one, like as I was kind of thinking about what I was going to talk about, it was pretty cool feeling because, man, if you had told me 7 years ago where I'd be at right now, I absolutely wouldn't believe you. But yeah, here we are. So we're going to talk about my move to Calgary. We're going to talk about the discomfort that went along with that. We're going to be talking about leaning into discomfort, and then in turn, how that can serve you as an athlete as well. So let's get into it in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the number one show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are going to be talking about discomfort. So we are going to be talking about leaning into discomfort, and the way we're going to go about this is I'm going to get into some of my own background, and specifically, I'm going to get into my move to Calgary, the discomfort and the things that almost stopped me from doing that. But then also I'm going to get into the benefits that have come from leaning into that discomfort, and in turn where I'm at now because I leaned in instead of leaning out when things were uncomfortable. So my move to Calgary. So let's go back a little bit, right around 6 years. Actually, it was January 2017 when I first had the conversation that led to me moving to Calgary. So basically, to break it down, in December 2016, I lost a relationship of 6 years, and then 2 weeks later got let go from my only job that I'd ever had that actually paid me money in strength and conditioning. Before then, I'd been doing a lot of work in the field, but had never actually been paid for it. So losing that job and knowing that there weren't a lot of jobs out there, and then losing a 6-year relationship with, at the time, who I thought was the girl I was going to marry and spend the rest of my life with, you can imagine I was not in a great place. I was drinking every night, basically just hiding away, locking myself in my room, working whatever jobs I could find to pay the bills just so I could kind of get through the week, making like no money whatsoever, surviving barely. Thankfully, I was living in a place that wasn't that expensive. But yeah, 6 years ago in a pretty awful place. And then there was just a night I can remember clearly where I just had enough. Like it had been probably 4 or 5 weeks and I just had enough. Like I knew that I needed to get out. I knew that, what I was doing here wasn't working. And I knew that it just like, I needed something new. So it was about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday. I can't remember the exact time, but it was about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was hammered, to put it nicely, and I was working at 7 o'clock the next morning. So obviously, really mature adult way to handle heartbreak and handle, the situation I was in. But it was 2 o'clock. I was hammered. I knew I had to be at work in like 5 hours, maybe. And I was sitting in my bedroom. All my roommates were asleep. And I was sitting in my bedroom and I just thought, I can't do this shit anymore. So I got on my computer and I just Googled strength and conditioning Canada and just thought, fuck it. I'm going to find something somewhere else and I'm just going to send out resumes. And so that's exactly what I did. I got on my computer, I started sending out resumes, and I worked at that for a couple of hours. I don't think I slept at all that night, maybe like 30 minutes before, like quick little nap before going to work that next morning. And basically by the next day, I had almost forgotten that I had done it. Like I kind of realized that I had sent out all these resumes, but I didn't really think anything of it. I kind of just was under the impression that jobs in this field didn't exist, so it wasn't going to lead anywhere anyway, but at least I could, check the box and say I tried. And, about a week went by. I didn't hear back from any of them. I sent out a lot. So I just kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to stay in Ottawa. I was going to probably have to move back in with my parents, which, I love them, but was not something that I was super excited about doing. And I was either going to have to quit coaching, or I was going to have to resign myself to a life of horrible poverty in order to pursue the passion that I wanted to pursue. Super fun place to be, I know. And so at that point, it had been about a week. I hadn't heard back from anybody. And then I got a message back, and it was from the Athlete Factory in Calgary. And I remember getting the message originally and being like, man, Calgary's really far. I don't think I want to do that. And so I almost didn't answer because, again, it made me nervous. It scared me thinking about moving across the country. So I had that message, and it said, the subject line was responding to your application. And I'm sitting there and I go, fuck, well, okay, I may as well hear them out. I may as well hear what's going on. And, well, screw it. Let's see. So I opened up the email, checked it out. They explained to me that when you work at that gym, you're fully responsible to build up your own clientele. So I would have to, go do my own marketing. I'd have to go find my own clients. If I was going to survive at that gym, it was going to be on me to do it. And I saw that and I went, no way. I had never done anything like that before. So the thought of moving across the country to start a job where I had to find my own clients and I had to do all my own thing scared the shit out of me, and immediately rejected the offer. I didn't actually send anything back to them, but I said, not a chance. I'm not doing that. And so a couple more days went by. I, spent the next couple of nights drinking my sorrows away, pitying myself about how there was no jobs in the industry. And it was so hard for me because I wanted to pursue a career in coaching, but there was just nothing for me. So I was going to have to keep working these jobs I didn't want to work, and going home and drinking and feeling sorry for myself. And then a couple more days passed by and I couldn't get the thought out of my head. Just go to Calgary. Even if you're there for 6 months, you learn a couple of things at this, cool looking new gym. Just go. And so I got back on my computer and I thought, okay, I'm going to answer. I'm going to at least set up the interview. What's the worst thing that happens? The worst thing that happens is they say that I'm not a good fit and they don't want me there. So I got back on my computer. I sent back, apologized for the delay, made something up about, why I didn't get back to them sooner, and then got an interview to my surprise. And again, the interview came through and my immediate reaction was, nope, it's a bad idea. They want to interview me, but it's such a long trip and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. And I have to find my own clients. I've never done that before. And I'm just going to basically be throwing my money out the window. No, I can't do it. But the interview was scheduled for a week away. So I was sitting there again and I'm sitting there going, a couple of days pass and I'm basically every day I was writing out the response saying, thank you so much for your consideration, but I've decided to go another direction, and then not sending it, and then writing it out again the next day and then not sending it. Because every day my only thought was, I've never lived more than 3 hours from home. I, never really fully supported myself before. I've never had a job where I had to find my own clients. All of these things were telling me that it was a bad idea. All of these things were telling me that I couldn't do this. All of these things were telling me that I wasn't going to be successful. I was going to be back home 6 months later with $0 in the bank, having to move in with my parents, hating my life, and then I'd be back even at a lower point than I was at right then. But needless to say, the days passed, and all the way up until the day before the interview, I was writing out that email saying, thank you so much for your consideration, but I've decided to go another direction. They're not sending it. And so eventually I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to go to the interview and get to know somebody in the field. That can't hurt. maybe something comes of it later down the road, but like, come on, they're not going to want me anyway. They have people pursuing PhDs. They have all these high level coaches. Like, why would they want me? And so I had the interview and I was talking to one guy. His name's Robin Bauer. I'll never forget it. And he basically just was asking me questions. He's like, how long have you been coaching? What kind of athletes have you worked with? What kind of experience do you have? Was just sort of asking me about my life in coaching. And to my surprise, he kept coming back with more positive responses. He was like, well, damn, that's awesome. That's super cool. Oh, you spent time working with the Montreal Alouettes. Wow. Like, we've actually got a couple of them that train here in the off season. And the more we talked, the more I thought, it sounds really cool. Going here sounds really cool. Having this experience sounds really cool. And, worst case, I can always come back, get a job and do something after, but it would be a cool experience to just go for 6 months, live out on my own, not be close to family, whatever, okay, I'll go, I'll try it. And then the interview ended and he said, okay, we need to set up a second interview. And so the nerves were there because now I actually wanted it. I actually wanted to, just go. But again, my head was, I'm going to go for 6 months to see if I can learn something to come back here and hopefully find a job. Here we are 6 years later, but that's a whole other story. Now, we had the second interview. Needless to say, it went well. Actually, funny enough, I kept having internet connection issues. So the second interview was actually horrendous. And I was like sweating my face off the whole time because I was so sure they were just going to dismiss me because they're like, his fucking internet doesn't work. He isn't hearing any of our questions. Clearly, whatever, we'll just move on to the next one. But we ended up getting enough through it and the interview went well and they invited me to come out. And so at this point, I'm looking at my bank account that had about $500 in it. And I thought, I can't, like, if it's going to cost me more than $500 to get out there. I can't live for even a week without having some income come in. So basically we delayed my start date. I moved out instead of in February, I moved out in June. So that gave me, 4 or 5 months to save up money, 4 or 5 months to, kind of get my shit together and get myself off and ready to go. And the best part of that, one of the best parts of having that time was, first, I didn't kick the drinking habit, but I had something that I was excited about. So it allowed me to actually, step back, and it allowed me to, get rid of a little bit of that habit, at least tone it down, because that money that I was putting towards drinking myself to sleep every night needed to go towards this 6-month trip to Calgary. Thanks for joining. It was great meeting you too. But the big thing that came from there, when I actually finally moved out, I remember the whole trip out here, I ended up driving my old Toyota Corolla out. And the whole trip out here, I kept thinking the same thing. It's like, I'm going to get in there and it's not going to go well. People are going to see me as a fraud. People are going to, think I'm an idiot. People aren't going to like me. I'm not going to do well. I'm not going to be able to find clients and I'm going to be screwed. But I kept trying to just reinforce in my head, despite the anxiety, despite the fact that most of the 7 days I was driving out, I just wanted to throw up. I kept just coming back to in my head, worst case, I come back in 6 months and I restart from nothing. Then I got out there. And the first day, honestly, was the day that it changed. So the first day I walked into the gym and it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Like, these guys were operating at such a high level. The coaching was so good. Everything they were doing was just levels above anything I had ever seen before. And I remember calling my parents that night and saying, I don't know how, but I need to figure out how to stay here. So at this point, again, I'm still looking and feeling like I don't belong here. These people are way better than me. They're going to feel like I'm a fraud. I'm not going to be able to find clients. But at this point, I'm determined. I need to make this work. And so basically, through this whole journey, up until getting to Calgary, my main point that I want to come back to is up until getting to Calgary, at every single turn that I could, my view was, how do I talk myself out of this? My view was, how do I convince myself that this is a bad idea? How do I convince myself not to do this? And the reason that I kept coming back to those thoughts was because it's in our nature to lean away from discomfort. It's in our nature to want to stay in our comfort zone. To, for me, that would have been stay at home. That would have been stay at home. That would have been, keep up with the bad habits. That would have been just go to work at the shitty job that I had and just deal with what life was throwing at me. But because I was able to continuously talk myself through that, because I was able to continuously say, no, I'm just going to make it to the next step. But worst case, it all falls apart and the sun's still going to come up tomorrow. And I was able to work my way all the way through that move to Calgary. What that allowed me to do was, honestly, over the last 6 years, change my life entirely. So now we're in Calgary. I've leaned through, I've worked through it, and I've realized I want to stay at this gym. They're doing things at a high level. They're people that I need to be around. I enjoyed my first, week or two there, so I need to figure it out. So at that point, I dove deep into researching marketing stuff. They had a program, it was called SC Level 1 at the gym, where basically to become a full-time coach, you needed to go in and shadow all the hours. You need to shadow 200 hours before you were actually allowed to take clients. So I asked the head coach at the gym, I said, how quickly is the fastest that anyone's gotten through the 200 hours? And they told me that it was 39 days that it took for the person to get through 200 hours. I got through mine in 27. And because I knew I need to stay here and I don't have a lot of money in the bank and I need to do everything I possibly can in order to make sure that I make it through. So that first year, 365 days that I was in Calgary, I was in the gym for 363 of them. And the reason I did that is because now I was still uncomfortable, but now I was learning to lean into the discomfort. I was learning that if I wanted to become a full-time strength and conditioning coach, like I had said that I did, if I wanted to do this for a living, if I wanted to actually survive, not living a life that I hated, depressed, working a job I didn't like, drinking every night, this was the start of that path. So I was willing to do whatever the fuck I needed to do in order to make sure that happened. So 363 of the first 365 days I was in Calgary, I was in the Athlete Factory. So needless to say, I got pretty comfortable there. But either way, I built up my whole clientele. I joined a networking group that I was paying hundreds of dollars a month for, that honestly, I did not have the hundreds of dollars a month to put down on, but it was a really good idea. So I made it happen. I had my grocery bill down to $37 a week. I was living in a horrifying little apartment. One of my walls was a curtain. I was living in a basement apartment that the people upstairs were hoarders. So the curtain wall that I had kept kind of getting pushed back with like more shit that they would just throw in their basement. So needless to say, not the best living situation out there. But again, at this point I had a goal: stay at the Athlete Factory. And the reason that this is so important, and the reason I wanted to talk about this today, is because, again, it's all about leaning into discomfort. It's all about figuring out what you actually want and figuring out how to make it happen. Spending $37 a week on groceries as a 205-pound man is not an easy thing to do. But if I wanted to survive, if I wanted to have money for rent, if I wanted to, have money to put gas in the car, if I wanted to be able to get to and from the gym, that's what I had to do. I had to cut it from somewhere. So I found ways to cut it from groceries. If I wanted to stay at the Athlete Factory, I needed to find a cheap place to live because I couldn't afford anything more, because even though I was working 7 days a week, I was making less than $1,000 a month. And so I found a place that was $500 a month, and it was horrifying, but it was 5 minutes away from the gym, and I drove nowhere else so that I didn't use any more gas, and that was it. So basically at every turn, I found the way to make what I wanted to happen. And the reason this is so important is because, guys, there are so many athletes out there that are so quick to go for the excuse. They don't want to hire that coach because it costs money. But if that coach can help them, then what is the return on investment? What is the return on investment in leaning into the discomfort, budgeting tighter, living in that place that might not be the best looking place, but is going to save you the money you need to save to be able to invest the money that you want to invest? And the reason that leaning into discomfort was so important for me specifically is let me talk a little bit about what I'm doing now 6 years later. So again, going back 6 years ago when I moved here, I was drinking myself to sleep every night. I was heartbroken. I felt like a fucking loser. Like I had no self-esteem whatsoever. I didn't feel like I belonged in this industry. And I almost talked myself out of every single step of the move that brought me here. I was making less than $1,000 a month walking dogs, and then moved out here, and then was making less than $1,000 a month actually in the gym. But that, because I was in the gym, that felt more than worth it. So that's where I was at 6 years ago. And because I leaned into the discomfort, because I put myself out there, because I continued to talk myself out of talking myself out of moving to Calgary, because I kept overcoming the objections that I had for myself, 6 years later, I'm now running a six-figure business. I'm now driving a car that I actually love getting into every day. I bought a 2017 Audi A4 in September. I have my own gym, which was something that I started dreaming about when I was 13 years old. And my business that I run has a coach working for me. And we have athletes in 8 different countries around the world. So that same 24-year-old that was scared to move out here, that was trying to talk himself out of every step of that move, that didn't feel like he belonged in the industry, that was drinking every single night, that was heartbroken, felt like a fucking loser, is now running a six-figure company, has people working for him, is coaching athletes all around the world, making an impact on a global scale, has a podcast that now has 268 episodes out, and is continuing to see further success in the industry. And why? For one reason only. And that reason is that when other people would lean out, I would lean in. And that's something that, I learned over time, and it was more of a reflection as I looked back on that. But when other people leaned out, I leaned in. Like I said, with that sports conditioning level 1 program that the gym had, where you had to shadow 200 hours before you were actually allowed to take clients, I asked who did it, how fast was the fastest anyone's ever gotten through the 200 hours. They told me 39 days. I got mine done in 27. Then the next level was sports conditioning level 2, where you were allowed to take clients, but you always kind of had to be mentored with your clients. And then the level above that was sports conditioning level 3, you guessed it. And usually they told me it takes 2 years to get promoted from sports conditioning 2 to 3. And within 7 months, I had taken my test to get promoted, and I got promoted. And so every time that a challenge was presented, I attacked that challenge with everything I fucking had. And the reason that I attacked that challenge with everything I fucking had is because I saw opportunity. I saw opportunity for myself to improve. I saw opportunity for me to make my dream come true, which was to work in this industry, to be around athletes all day, to do exactly what I'm doing now on a larger scale. And as soon as I saw that opportunity, I knew anything that they asked me to do, anything that I need in order to reach the next level here, I have to do. And not only did I want to do it, I wanted to do it better than anyone else. So every challenge that they put forward, my goal was to do it better than anybody had ever done it before. And exactly that. Level 1 to level 2, 27 days compared to the fastest ever, which was 39. Level 2 to level 3 usually takes 2 to 3 years. It took me 7 months. And then, long story short, that company was great educationally, great coaching wise, but they had some business issues, we'll say, to say the least. So I ended up going off on my own late 2019, which was just in time for the global pandemic to shut everything down. That fun thing that we've all been through over the past 3 years. And this was a whole other level now, right? And so I've been through this whole growth. I've been through this whole development where now, I'm someone who's striving for what they want instead of someone who's backing away and shying away from the world. But now coming into 2020, I was running my own business. I had, drastically cut my income again, starting from the scratch again, starting off on my own, just in time for the world to say, hey, you're not allowed in the gym. And So this was a new level, because the most important part of this talk, and the most important part of what I want you to get away from this, is as you continue to progress, it doesn't just get easier. I'm not at a level now where every day is just easy and flowing and whatever, but the problems I have are higher level problems. The things that I deal with are at a higher level. So I went from dealing with a problem as an employee working my way up the chain in a company to dealing with a problem as the boss and having to figure it out on my own, because if I wasn't able to figure it out, I was screwed and was going to have to go back to working for someone else. And as the pandemic progressed, it also helped me shift my vision. It also helped me understand that as much as I love coaching, I don't want to be in the gym 47 hours a week forever, barely making $3,000 to $4,000 a month, surviving but not thriving. I want to be able to coach my own athletes, but I also want to be able to coach coaches. I also want to be able to spread my impact because ultimately my goal is to impact as many people as I can through this work. And so if I'm one coach with 40 athletes, I can impact 40 people. But if I'm one coach with 25 athletes, but then I have 5 coaches on my team and I'm indirectly impacting all of their 25 athletes, now that's continuing to multiply the level of impact that I can have. So over the pandemic, that allowed me to shift my mentality again. And that allowed me to really lean into the fact that I was meant for more than just being one coach with, 5 or 10 athletes and just doing my thing. Like, I was meant to have a larger impact. And over that time is where I leaned into how I can create that larger impact. So I'm going to wrap it up there because I feel like we need to do a part 2 here because I'm pushing 30 minutes. And so I want to just leave you guys with this. When you have those feelings of anxiety, when you have those feelings of discomfort, when you're unsure about, next steps in your life, or unsure about an opportunity, or you're always trying to find the reasons not to do something, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. I'm not sure what it's going to get for, what I'm going to get out of it, whatever the reason might be. Understand that those feelings of discomfort, on the other side of that is growth. On the other side of that is the next level of you. And if you're able to lean into that, you're able to find that next level of yourself. You're able to find, the version of me that I am now compared to who I was when I moved here. That unlocks even more new levels. Because right now you might be at level 1. Kenny 1.0, honestly, looking back on him, was a fucking loser. I look back on that and I can't believe some of the things that I dealt with. I can't believe some of the things that made me insecure. I can't believe, so many things about my life when I was at that point. But being able to go through those difficult times, being able to go through the adversity, being able to, actually talk myself into making that move, that was what allowed me to level up as a human, level up as a business owner, as a coach, all of those things, and continue to impact on a larger and larger scale. So when you have those feelings, understand that the other side of that is new levels of yourself. The other side of that is growth. The other side of that is the person that you are actually working towards becoming. So stop shying away from it and start leaning into it. One of my favorite expressions that I got from one of my business coaches was, when other people lean out, lean in. And being able to do that has honestly been the number one reason why this move to Calgary was, the shift for me as a person, the shift for me as a coach. And it's honestly the reason that I'm able to wake up every day at 4:30 in the morning, excited to get after my day. The reason why I'm able to wake up at 4:30 in the morning and love what I get to do every day. And so if you truly want to hit that point where you can look at your day-to-day life, you can look at the things you do, and you can truly say, this is what I want to do with my life, lean in when other people lean out. So that's it. That's all. I appreciate you for tuning in, especially those who made it this far. Thank you. And this episode of the podcast is going to be coming out next week. But as always, my one ask of you guys is, if you got some value from this, share it with a friend, share it with a teammate, share it with a coach, share it with someone who needs to hear this message. And I appreciate you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.